Stop right there. This vehicle is in violation." Those words cut through the quiet Saturday morning like shattering glass. I stood on my own front porch, watching two men in uniforms pry open the door of my wife's '67 Mustang, the car her father brought back from Vietnam, the car he rebuilt with his own hands after 25 years of military service. Patricia Henderson stood beside them, clipboard tucked under her arm, white polo shirt embroidered with the HOA logo. She looked at me with absolute certainty, the kind of certainty you only get when you are used to giving orders, and no one ever dares to question them. I should have known Ridgewood Estates would not be simple, but what happened next is the real story. When she pulled out her phone and called 911 to report me as a threat. When the police arrived and discovered who my wife really was, let us just say some people paid a very heavy price for their wrong assumptions. Leave a comment below. Where are you watching from? The sound hit me first, metal scraping against metal, a sound that did not belong on a Saturday morning in my own driveway. I stepped onto the porch with my coffee still warm in my hand and saw two men in dark uniforms crouched beside my wife's Mustang. One of them had a crowbar jammed into the doorframe. The other was working on the lock. Paint was already flaking off. The side mirror hung crooked, and standing behind them, clipboard in hand, was a woman I had seen only once before, Patricia Henderson, president of the Ridgewood Estates HOA. She watched the damage happen like she was supervising a routine landscaping job. If you have ever seen someone destroy something you love while acting like they are doing you a favor, leave a comment below. Where are you watching from? My name is Daniel Crawford, 38 years old, software engineer. I work from home, which is why I was there to witness what should have been impossible. My wife Rachel and I moved to Ridgewood Estates 3 months ago. We chose this house because the garage was big enough for her '67 Mustang Fastback. That car was not a hobby. It was not a collector's item she kept for show. It was the last promise she made to her father before he died. He had asked her to take care of it. She kept that promise every single week. The car ran perfectly. The registration was current. The insurance was paid. None of that seemed to matter to the woman standing in my driveway. I walked toward them. My voice came out steadier than I felt. "What are you doing?" Patricia turned to face me. She was somewhere around 60, with silver hair cropped short, a polo shirt embroidered with the HOA logo. Her expression carried the kind of certainty that comes from years of never being questioned. "Mr. Crawford," she said, "this vehicle violates Section 4.7. Inoperable classic cars are not permitted on residential driveways. We are removing it to a storage facility." I told her the car was not inoperable. I told her my wife drove it to work 3 days ago. I told her I could show her the paperwork right now. Patricia did not blink. "We have received multiple complaints. The board reviewed the matter and authorized removal. If you want to dispute it, you may file an appeal." She said it like she was reading from a script, like she had done this before. I asked to see the complaints, confidential. I asked to see the board minutes, requires a formal request. I asked her to pause the removal until I could speak with someone in authority. She shook her head. "The decision has been made." One of the security guards pried harder. The doorframe cracked. I stepped forward without thinking. Patricia stepped back immediately. Her hand went up as I had shoved her. "Do not come any closer," she said. Her voice was suddenly loud, loud enough to carry across the street, loud enough for the neighbors peeking through their blinds. "I am calling 911. You are threatening my staff and me." I had not touched anyone. I had not raised my voice. But she was already dialing. I could hear her words to the operator. "Aggressive male, threatening behavior. Please send someone immediately." The security guards kept working. One of them glanced at me with something like discomfort. The other did not look up at all. I stood there, frozen, watching them destroy something irreplaceable. This was not a misunderstanding. Patricia Henderson knew exactly what she was doing. She was not enforcing rules. She was manufacturing a narrative. And in that narrative, I was already the villain. The sirens started somewhere in the distance. I could feel the weight of what was coming. A police report, a formal complaint, my word against hers. And she had 2 witnesses in uniform. I did not know how to fight something like this. I had never had to. The back door opened behind me. Rachel stepped out onto the porch. She was still wearing the clothes she had fallen asleep in the night before. She had been working late again, reviewing files on her laptop. the way she always did when a case was keeping her up. The laptop was still in her hand, screen open. She walked down the steps slowly. She did not say a word. She just looked at the Mustang, at the cracked door frame, at the scratches running down the side panel, at the men who had stopped working the moment she appeared. Her face was still, her breathing was even, but I knew that look. It was the look she wore in court when she already knew how the case would end. Patricia turned toward her. "And who are you?" Rachel's voice was quiet, controlled. "I am the owner of that vehicle." Patricia's smile tightened. "Well, your husband needs to learn how to behave. I have already called the police, and I will be filing a formal complaint with the board. You will be hearing from our attorney." Rachel nodded once. Just once, like she was making a note. She did not argue, she did not explain, she just stood there with her laptop open, watching everything unfold. I did not understand it then. Why was she so calm? Why did she not try to stop them? Why did she seem almost prepared for this? The sirens grew louder. Patricia straightened her clipboard, satisfied. The security guards shifted uneasily, and my wife stood perfectly still, the glow of her screen reflecting faintly in her eyes. She had already started recording. I would learn that later. The doorbell camera had captured everything from the first scratch. Her laptop had been running a screen recording the moment she heard the noise outside. But there was something else. Something she had not told me yet. Rachel had seen situations like this before. She had handled cases like this before. And she had been watching Ridgewood Estates long before we ever moved in. The police were almost here. Patricia had no idea what she had just set in motion. The police cruiser pulled into our driveway 4 minutes after Patricia made the call. 2 officers stepped out. Both were young, maybe late 20s. Their hands rested near their belts as they scanned the scene. Patricia moved toward them immediately, clipboard raised like a badge of authority. She spoke before they could ask a single question. "Officers, thank you for coming so quickly. This man became aggressive when we attempted to enforce community regulations. He approached my staff in a threatening manner. I feared for our safety." Her voice was steady, practiced, the kind of voice that knew how to sound reasonable while saying unreasonable things. One of the officers held up a hand toward me. "Sir, please step back. We need to get the full picture here." I stepped back. I did exactly what they asked. Patricia continued talking. She explained the HOA's authority to enforce aesthetic standards. She referenced Section 4.7. She described my aggressive posture and how I had advanced toward her staff. The security guards stood behind her, silent, their uniforms lending weight to her words. They looked like law enforcement. They acted like law enforcement. But they were private contractors hired by the HOA. They had no legal authority to touch my wife's car. That distinction did not seem to matter. One of the officers turned to me. "Sir, did you approach these individuals in a threatening manner?" I explained what happened. I walked toward my own car on my own property because strangers were damaging it. The officer listened, but his eyes kept drifting back to Patricia. She stood with her arms crossed, shaking her head slowly. "That is not what happened," she said. "I have 2 witnesses." She gestured to the security guards. They nodded in unison. That was the moment I understood. The truth did not matter here. What mattered was who controlled the story. And Patricia had been controlling stories in this neighborhood long before I arrived. The officer turned back to me. "Sir, I understand you are upset, but right now, we need everyone to stay calm." The word calm landed like a verdict. He had already decided who was being reasonable. A small crowd had gathered on the sidewalk by then. Neighbors I had waved to but never really spoken with. An older couple from across the street. A man in running shorts who had stopped mid-jog. They watched in silence, their faces carefully neutral, but I could feel the weight of judgment forming. Patricia noticed them too. She turned slightly, raising her voice just enough to carry, "This is why we have standards. The board has a responsibility to protect this community." A few heads nodded. The older woman whispered something to her husband. I was becoming a story in real time. The new neighbor who caused trouble, the outsider who could not follow the rules. None of them knew what had actually happened. None of them asked. Rachel had been standing on the porch the entire time. She had not moved. She had not spoken. Her laptop was closed now, tucked under her arm. I watched her eyes move slowly from the officers to Patricia to the gathering crowd. There was something deliberate in her stillness, the way she held her shoulders, the way she breathed. It reminded me of how she looked before the closing arguments, like she was mapping the room, calculating distances, waiting for the right moment that had not arrived yet. One of the officers glanced in her direction. He squinted briefly, the way you do when something feels familiar but you cannot quite place it. Then he looked away and returned his attention to Patricia. The moment passed, but I noticed Rachel had noticed too. Her expression did not change. She simply filed it away. The second officer asked if Patricia wanted to file a formal complaint. She said yes. She would also be sending a report to the HOA board and consulting with their attorney. She said this would not be tolerated. Her words were aimed at me, but her audience was the crowd. She was not just building a legal case. She was building a social one. Reputation is a verdict that does not require evidence. By the time the officers returned to their cruiser, half the neighborhood had already made up their minds. One of them handed me a card with a case number. "If you want to dispute anything, you can contact the department," he said. His tone was polite but distant. He did not offer advice. He did not ask if I was okay. He just got in the car and drove away. Patricia watched them leave with a thin smile. Then she turned to face Rachel directly. "I do not believe we have met. I am Patricia Henderson, president of the Homeowners Association." Rachel's voice was flat. "I know who you are." Patricia's smile flickered for just a moment. "Then you understand that we take violations seriously. I will be recommending a formal hearing before the board. I suggest you consult an attorney." She turned and walked back toward her golf cart, the security guards trailing behind her. The crowd began to disperse. A few of them glanced back at us. No one said anything. No one offered support. We were already on the outside. Rachel finally moved. She walked down the steps and stood beside me, looking at the Mustang. The doorframe was cracked. The paint was gouged. The mirror dangled by a wire. 18 years of careful maintenance, damaged in 15 minutes. I expected anger. I expected tears. But her face remained still. She reached into her pocket, pulled out her phone, and typed something quickly. "What are you doing?" I asked. She did not look at me. Her eyes stayed on the car, making sure none of this disappears. She put the phone away and walked back inside without another word. I stood alone in the driveway, staring at the damage. Somewhere down the street, Patricia's golf cart hummed away. She believed she had won. She had no idea what was coming. Rachel did not speak for the first 10 minutes after we went inside. She sat at the kitchen table with her laptop open, fingers moving across the keyboard in short, deliberate bursts. I stood by the window, watching the last of the neighbors drift back to their houses. The street looked normal again, quiet, like nothing had happened. But the Mustang was still sitting in the driveway with its door hanging open and its paint scraped down to the metal. I could not stop looking at it. Rachel could not stop working. Finally, I asked her what she was doing. She did not look up. "Building a file," she said. Her voice was calm, too calm, the kind of calm that made me nervous. She turned the laptop toward me. On the screen was a folder with today's date. Inside were 3 video files. The first was from our doorbell camera. It showed the entire incident from the moment the security guards arrived to the moment the police drove away. The second was a screen recording from her laptop. She had been on a video call with a colleague when she heard the noise outside. She muted herself, kept the call running, and pointed the screen toward the window. It captured a different angle, a clearer view of Patricia giving orders. The third file was audio only. Her phone had been recording in her pocket from the moment she stepped onto the porch. Every word Patricia said, every instruction she gave the security guards, every lie she told the officers, all of it documented, all of it time-stamped, all of it is admissible. I asked her why she had started recording before she even knew what was happening. She paused for a moment, choosing her words carefully. "I have learned to be prepared," she said. "Situations like this do not usually announce themselves, but they always leave a trail if you know where to look." She pulled up another window, a folder labeled Ridgewood. Inside were documents I had never seen before, complaints filed with the county, emails from residents describing fines for violations that did not exist, a letter from a family who had been forced to pay over $2,000 in storage fees after the HOA towed their car without notice. 6 households, 6 separate incidents, all pointing to the same pattern, all pointing to Patricia Henderson. Rachel explained it without emotion. Her office had received these complaints months ago. They were not enough to build a case on their own. Hearsay, incomplete records, no direct evidence of wrongdoing. She had flagged the file, but could not move forward without more. Then we moved to Ridgewood Estates. She had not planned it. We chose the house because of the garage, because of the neighborhood, because it seemed like a good place to start a family. But once she saw the HOA documents, she recognized the name, Patricia Henderson, the same woman from the complaints. Rachel had been watching, waiting, not for revenge, for proof. And today, Patricia had handed it to her personally. I did not know how to feel. Part of me was relieved. Part of me was unsettled. My wife had known about this and never mentioned it. She had let us move into a neighborhood she suspected was corrupt, but I understood why. Rachel did not deal in suspicion. She dealt in evidence. And until this morning, she did not have any that would hold up. Now she had video, audio, witnesses, a damaged vehicle worth tens of thousands of dollars, and a woman who had just lied to the police on camera. The balance had shifted. Patricia did not know it yet, but she had made a very serious mistake. Rachel stood up and grabbed her keys. She told me she needed to take photos of the damage before we touched anything. She needed to get a written estimate from a restoration shop. She needed to file a formal complaint with the Arizona Department of Real Estate and request the body camera footage from the officers who responded. Each step was precise. Each step was necessary. I offered to help, but she shook her head. "I need you to stay here," she said. "If anyone from the HOA comes back, do not engage, do not argue, just record." She paused at the door. "And do not tell anyone what we are doing, not the neighbors, not your friends, no one." I asked her why. She looked at me with an expression I had seen only a few times before, the expression she wore when a case was about to break open. "Because the moment they know we are building something, they will try to bury it." She left. I sat alone in the kitchen, staring at the folder on her laptop. 6 families, 6 complaints, years of damage, and now us. I thought about the crowd that had gathered on the sidewalk, the way they had looked at me, the way they had nodded along with Patricia's words. They believed her. They had no reason to. She was the president. She wore the logo. She spoke with authority. And I was just the new guy who could not follow the rules. That was the story now. That was the version spreading through the neighborhood. But Rachel was building a different story, one with timestamps and footage and documentation, one that would not rely on anyone's word. I just had to be patient. I just had to stay quiet. That night, Rachel came home with a folder full of paperwork, estimates, filings, reference numbers. She spread them across the table and walked me through each one. The damage to the Mustang was assessed at just over $18,000. The restoration shop owner had written a detailed report. He was also a veteran. He understood what that car meant. The county had accepted her complaint. The department had acknowledged her request for body camera footage. Everything was in motion, but Rachel was not smiling. "This is just the beginning," she said. "Patricia is not going to sit still. She is going to escalate, and when she does, we need to be ready." I asked her what she meant. She pulled up her phone and showed me a notification. A new post had appeared on the neighborhood message board. The title made my stomach drop. "Community Safety Alert Incident Involving New Resident." Patricia was not waiting. She was already building her next attack. The post went up at 7 in the morning. I found it when I checked my phone over coffee, still half asleep. "Community Safety Alert Incident Involving New Resident." Patricia had written it herself. The language was careful but devastating. She described a confrontation at our property. She mentioned aggressive behavior and verbal threats. She claimed the security guards had felt genuinely unsafe while performing their duties. She did not use my name directly. She did not have to. She listed our address. She included a photograph of the Mustang with the caption, "This vehicle has been lowering property values for months." By the time I finished reading, there were already over 80 comments. By noon, there were more than 200. I scrolled through them with a growing sense of nausea. People I had never met were calling me dangerous, unstable, a threat to the community. One woman wrote that she had always felt something was off about our house. A man suggested the board should consider legal action. Another comment recommended that residents stay vigilant and report any suspicious activity at our address. A few people defended us vaguely, saying they did not know the full story. But those comments were buried. The loudest voices were the ones agreeing with Patricia, and Patricia was responding to every single one, thanking them for their concern, assuring them the board was taking the matter seriously. She was not just attacking us, she was building consensus, turning suspicion into certainty. The cease and desist letter arrived by courier the next morning. It was from the HOA's attorney. The letter accused me of harassment and intimidation toward HOA staff. It demanded that I refrain from any further contact with Patricia Henderson, the security personnel, or any board members. It warned that failure to comply could result in legal action. I read it 3 times, trying to find something I had actually done wrong. There was nothing. I had not contacted anyone. I had not posted anything. I had not even left the house since the incident. But the letter existed now. It was part of the record. Another piece of the story Patricia was constructing. That afternoon, a security golf cart began circling our block every 30 minutes, a visible reminder that we were being watched. The worst part came that evening. A coworker who lived 2 streets over sent me a message asking if everything was okay. His tone was careful, distant. The kind of tone people use when they are not sure whose side to be on. I told him it was a misunderstanding. He said he hoped it would get sorted out. Then he stopped responding. The next day, 2 other colleagues who lived in Ridgewood avoided me in our virtual meeting. The damage was spreading beyond the neighborhood. Patricia had found a way to make me toxic without ever saying my name out loud. By the time most people finished reading her posts, they believed they already knew the truth. Rachel came home that night with a strange expression on her face. She set her bag down slowly and sat across from me at the kitchen table. "She found out I'm a lawyer," she said. I asked how. She pulled up the neighborhood board on her phone. Patricia had posted again. This time, the message was more pointed. "It has come to my attention that the wife of the individual involved in last week's incident is an attorney. Some people believe they can bully this community with legal threats. Let me be clear, we will not be intimidated. The board will continue to enforce our standards regardless of who tries to obstruct us." The comments underneath were worse than before. One person called Rachel a typical lawyer who thinks she is above the rules. Another suggested we were planning to sue our way out of accountability. The narrative had shifted. We were no longer just troublemakers. We were predators. I wanted to respond. I wanted to post the doorbell footage and let everyone see what had really happened. Rachel shook her head. "Not yet." I asked her why. She leaned forward, her voice steady. "If we release the video now, it becomes a public argument. She will say it is edited. She will say it does not show the full picture. Her supporters will believe her because they want to. We need more than video. We need the body camera footage from the officers. We need the official complaint on record. We need the restoration estimate documented." Every lie she tells between now and then becomes part of the pattern. Let her keep talking. I understood the logic, but it did not make the waiting easier. I asked her how long we had to endure this. She looked at me with something close to sympathy. Long enough for her to believe she has already won. That night, 2 things happened at almost the same moment. Rachel received an email from the Phoenix Police Department. The body camera footage from the responding officers was ready for pickup. She could retrieve it the following morning. At the same time, my phone buzzed with a new notification from the neighborhood board. Patricia had posted a video. It was taken from a security guard's phone. The clip was short, maybe 15 seconds. It showed me walking toward the Mustang with what looked like an aggressive stride. There was no audio, no context, no footage of what happened before or after, just me, moving toward the car, looking angry. The caption read, "See for yourself." This is who we are dealing with. The video already had dozens of shares. Rachel watched it over my shoulder. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then the corner of her mouth shifted slightly. Not quite a smile, something more controlled. "She recorded on our property without consent," she said. "And she edited the footage to remove context. That could be problematic for her." I asked what she meant. She pulled up her phone and added another note to her file. "Defamation requires proof of falsity and intent. Recording without consent on private property raises its own issues under Arizona law. I am not saying we have a slam dunk, but she just gave us something we did not have before. A pattern of deliberate misrepresentation, documented, time-stamped, public." She set the phone down. Her expression was unreadable. "She thinks she is winning. Let her keep thinking that, because every move she makes from here is going to cost her." And the emergency board meeting was held on a Thursday evening in the community center. 147 residents signed in at the door. I know because I counted them. Rachel and I arrived 10 minutes early and sat in the back row. We did not speak to anyone. We did not make eye contact. We just sat there, waiting, while the room filled with people who had already made up their minds about us. Patricia Henderson stood at the front, arranging papers on a long table. The 2 security guards sat beside her. 4 other board members filled out the panel. The room smelled like coffee and carpet cleaner. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Everything about the setting was designed to feel official, legitimate, like justice was about to be served. Patricia called the meeting to order at exactly 7 o'clock. She thanked everyone for attending on short notice. She explained that the board had a responsibility to address serious concerns that had arisen in the community. Then she turned to face the audience and began her version of events. She described the morning of the incident in careful detail, the routine enforcement action, the aggressive homeowner who had charged at her staff, the fear she had felt, the necessity of calling the police. She spoke slowly, pausing for effect, letting each accusation settle into the room before moving on. She never raised her voice. She did not have to. The crowd was already leaning in her direction. The security guards spoke next. One of them described how I had advanced rapidly toward them while they were performing their lawful duties. The other said he had felt genuinely threatened and was prepared to defend himself. Neither of them mentioned that they had been prying open a car door with a crowbar. Neither of them mentioned that the vehicle was parked on private property. Neither of them mentioned that they had no legal authority to touch it. But none of that mattered. They were in uniform. They used professional language, they looked credible, and the room believed them. A board member named Harold Crenshaw proposed the penalty, a fine of $5,000 for violation of community standards and threatening behavior toward HOA personnel. In addition, the Mustang would be classified as an inoperable nuisance vehicle and subject to mandatory removal within 30 days. If we failed to comply, the HOA would authorize towing and storage at our expense. Patricia nodded approvingly. "I believe this is a reasonable and measured response," she said. "We cannot allow this kind of behavior to go unchecked. The safety of our community depends on it." She asked if there was any discussion before the vote. The room was silent. Then someone in the front row turned around and looked at us. "What about them?" he asked. "Do they get to speak?" Patricia's smile tightened. "Of course," she said. "The Crawfords are welcome to address the board if they wish." Every head in the room turned toward us. I could feel the weight of their stares, the expectation, the judgment. Rachel sat perfectly still beside me. She had told me exactly what to do before we arrived. Do not argue. Do not explain. Do not give them anything they can twist. I stood up slowly. I walked to the front of the room. I did not look at Patricia. I did not look at the crowd. I simply handed a single sheet of paper to the board secretary. "This is a formal objection to these proceedings," I said. "It cites multiple violations of due process as outlined in the HOA's own governing documents. I am requesting that this objection be entered into the official record." Then I turned and walked back to my seat. The room erupted in murmurs. Patricia's expression flickered with something between confusion and irritation. "That is all?" she asked. "You have nothing else to say?" I did not respond. Rachel did not respond. We just sat there, silent, while the whispers spread through the crowd. I heard someone behind me mutter, "If they had evidence, they would show it." Another voice agreed. "Their silence says everything." Patricia let the moment. Then she smiled. "Very well. If the Crawfords have no defense to offer, I suggest we proceed to a vote." She turned toward Rachel. "I would also like to note for the record that Mrs. Crawford is an attorney. One might expect a legal professional to understand the importance of community standards. Instead, she has chosen to remain silent while her husband's behavior speaks for itself. Frankly, I find it disgraceful." She paused. "I will be filing a formal complaint with the Arizona State Bar regarding her conduct in this matter." The vote was 7-2. The fine was approved. The removal order was authorized. Patricia thanked the board for their diligence. The crowd began to disperse. A few people glanced at us with pity. Most did not look at all. We had been tried and convicted in under an hour. No cross-examination, no evidence review, no opportunity to present our side. Just a room full of people who had already decided we were guilty. Rachel stood up calmly. She gathered her notebook. She walked toward the exit without a word. I followed her, keeping my eyes forward, ignoring the whispers that trailed behind us. We were almost at the door when someone touched my arm. I turned. An older man stood beside me. He was maybe 70, 72, gray hair, weathered face. He spoke quietly, barely above a whisper. "I know what they did to your car," he said. "They did the same thing to my wife's garden 3 years ago, tore it all up, said it attracted pests. We were too old to fight back, but I kept everything, photos, letters, all of it." He pressed something into my hand, a small USB drive. "I hope this helps," he said. "Someone needs to stop her." I looked down at the drive, then back at him. "What is your name?" He glanced toward the front of the room, where Patricia was shaking hands with board members. "Walter Morrison," he said. "I have lived here for 20 years, and I have watched her do this to a lot of good people." He turned and walked away before I could respond. Rachel was waiting for me outside. I showed her the USB drive. She did not ask what it was. She already knew. "How many others?" she asked. I told her what Walter had said. 3 years, photos, letters, everything. She nodded slowly. "That makes 7 families now, 7 documented cases." She looked back at the community center, where the lights were beginning to shut off. "She thinks she won tonight. She thinks we have nothing, but every move she makes from here only tightens the case." I asked her what happened next. She put the USB drive in her pocket. "Tomorrow, I pick up the body camera footage. Then we see exactly what the officers saw and what they chose to ignore." And the press conference was held on a Tuesday morning at the Maricopa County District Attorney's office. Rachel had recused herself from the case 3 weeks earlier to avoid any appearance of conflict. An independent prosecutor named David Brennan had reviewed the evidence and approved the charges. I sat in the back of the room, watching reporters file in, local news crews, a few print journalists, someone from a legal blog that covered HOA disputes. Word had spread that something significant was about to happen. What none of them knew was that Patricia Henderson had been invited, not as a defendant, not yet, but as a party with relevant information that might wish to respond. Her lawyer had accepted on her behalf. When she walked through the door, she looked confident, almost amused, like she was attending a formality before returning to her regular life. David Brennan stepped to the podium at exactly 10 o'clock. He was in his 50s, gray at the temples, with the kind of voice that filled a room without effort. "Good morning," he said. "We are here to announce the results of an investigation into civil rights violations, fraud, and abuse of authority within the Ridgewood Estates Homeowners Association." He paused to let the words settle. Patricia's smile did not waver. She whispered something to her lawyer. Brennan continued. "Over the past several months, this office has received complaints from multiple residents alleging a pattern of unlawful conduct by HOA leadership. These complaints described unauthorized seizure of property, falsified violation notices, and intimidation tactics designed to silence dissent. Until recently, we lacked sufficient evidence to proceed. That changed 4 weeks ago." The first video appeared on the screen behind him, body camera footage from one of the responding officers. The image was shaky but clear. It showed Patricia speaking before anyone else had a chance. It showed her pointing at me. It showed the security guards nodding along. It showed the officer asking me to step back without ever asking what had happened. It showed Patricia's voice, steady and confident, describing events that the camera itself contradicted. The footage ran for 6 minutes. By the end, the room was silent. Brennan introduced the second video. This one came from our doorbell camera. It began before the body camera footage. It showed the security guards arriving. It showed them approaching the Mustang with tools. It showed one of them jamming a crowbar into the door frame while the other worked on the lock. It showed Patricia standing behind them, clipboard in hand, watching. It showed the damage being done before I even stepped outside. It showed everything Patricia had claimed did not happen. The timestamp in the corner proved the sequence. The audio captured her voice, giving instructions. "Hurry up! He is going to come out soon." The room shifted. Reporters leaned forward. Someone in the front row typed furiously on a laptop. Then came the third piece of evidence. Rachel's laptop recording. The angle was different. The sound was clearer. It captured Patricia's face as she watched the guards work. It captured her expression when she saw me step onto the porch. It captured the moment she reached for her phone and dialed 911, and it captured her words to the operator. "A man is threatening us. Please send someone immediately." The video showed no threat. The video showed a man standing on his own property, asking why strangers were destroying his wife's car. The disconnect between her words and reality was undeniable. Brennan paused the footage. He turned to face the room. The vehicle in question is a 1967 Ford Mustang Fastback. It belonged to Master Sergeant William Torres, a decorated United States Army veteran who served 2 tours in Vietnam and 25 years of active duty. He passed away in 2019 and left the car to his daughter, Rachel Crawford. She has maintained it in full working condition ever since. The claim that it was an inoperable nuisance vehicle is demonstrably false. He clicked to the next slide, a photograph of Rachel's father standing beside the Mustang in 1968. Young, proud, wearing his uniform, the room was completely still. The final segment of evidence came from Walter Morrison's USB drive. It contained photographs, letters, and records spanning 3 years, 7 families in total, 7 cases of unauthorized towing, fabricated fines, and intimidation, 7 patterns that matched exactly what had happened to us. Brennan did not read every document. He did not have to. He simply displayed them on the screen, one after another, while the reporters took notes. When he finished, he announced the charges: Patricia Henderson filing a false police report, conspiracy to commit fraud, harassment, and abuse of authority. The 2 security guards impersonating peace officers, destruction of property, and trespassing. Additional board members were under investigation for negligence and obstruction. Patricia's lawyer leaned over and whispered something urgent. She shook her head. She stood up before he could stop her. "This is a setup," she said. Her voice was loud, shaking. "That woman," she pointed at Rachel, who was sitting near the side of the room, "is using her position to destroy me. This is personal. This is revenge. She planned this from the beginning." Brennan remained calm. "For the record," he said, "Assistant District Attorney Crawford recused herself from this case 3 weeks ago. The investigation was conducted independently. The charges were reviewed and approved by a separate prosecutor with no connection to the Crawford family." Patricia did not stop. "I do not care. She orchestrated all of this. She moved into my neighborhood to entrap me. This is corruption. This is abuse of power." Her lawyer grabbed her arm. She pulled away. "I will sue every single one of you. I will take this to the state Supreme Court. You have no idea who you are dealing with." The cameras captured every word, every gesture, every moment of her unraveling. She had been allowed to respond with dignity. Instead, she had chosen to accuse, deflect, and threaten. She had done exactly what Rachel predicted she would do. She had revealed herself, not because anyone forced her to, but because she could not imagine a world where she was not in control. Brennan waited until she finished. Then he spoke one final time. "The defendants will be formally charged later today. Arraignment is scheduled for next week. This office will have no further comment until proceedings are complete." He stepped away from the podium. The room erupted with questions. Patricia's lawyer pulled her toward the exit. She was still talking, still pointing, still insisting that none of this was her fault. I found Rachel outside, standing near the parking lot. She was watching Patricia being escorted to a waiting car. Her face was calm, unreadable. I asked her how she felt. She did not answer immediately. She just watched until the car pulled away. Then she turned to me. "It is not over," she said. "She will fight. She will appeal. She will try to spin this as persecution. And some people will believe her." I asked what we do now. She looked back toward the building where reporters were still filing out. "We let the system work. We let the evidence speak. And we make sure the people she hurt get the chance to be heard." She paused. "That is how you win without becoming what they are." 3 months passed. The legal process moved slowly, the way it always does when evidence is overwhelming and denial is futile. Patricia Henderson pleaded no contest to filing a false police report and harassment. The fraud charges were reduced as part of a deal that spared her a trial. She received 2 years of probation, 200 hours of community service, and a $25,000 fine. As a condition of her probation, she was prohibited from serving in any leadership or advisory capacity within a homeowners association for the duration of her sentence. The court records would be publicly accessible. Anyone who searched her name would find them. The security guards each received 6 months of suspended jail time and $10,000 in restitution. Their employment history would reflect termination for cause. 3 board members resigned before the investigation reached them. The rest agreed to cooperate with an independent audit. The civil lawsuit was settled out of court. 7 families, $180,000. Our share was $32,000, enough to cover the restoration of the Mustang and then some, but the money was never the point. The point was documentation. The point was precedent. As part of the settlement agreement, the HOA was required to implement structural reforms under court oversight. No more private security with ambiguous authority. No more enforcement actions without proper notice and due process. No more anonymous complaints used to justify punishment. A compliance monitor would review HOA operations for the next 2 years. Everything would be recorded. Everything would be transparent. The rules Patricia had bent for years were now written into a legally binding consent decree. The special election happened 6 weeks after the press conference. Voter turnout was the highest in the history of Ridgewood Estates. Every incumbent board member was removed. Walter Morrison was elected president by a margin of nearly 3-1. He accepted the position with a short speech that I will never forget. "I stayed quiet for too long," he said. "A lot of us did. We told ourselves it was not our problem. We told ourselves someone else would handle it. But silence has a cost, and the people who paid that cost were our neighbors." He paused. "I cannot undo what was done, but I can make sure it does not happen again." The room applauded. Some people cried. A few of them had been among the loudest voices against us just months earlier. The apologies came slowly. The older couple from across the street stopped by with a bottle of wine. They said they were sorry for not speaking up sooner. A man who had called me dangerous on the neighborhood board knocked on our door and admitted he had believed what he was told because it was easier than asking questions. Rachel listened to each of them without interruption. She did not offer absolution. She did not dismiss their concerns. She simply nodded and said, "Now you know. Do not let it happen again." Not everyone apologized. A small faction insisted Patricia had been treated unfairly. They posted their theories online. They whispered at community events. But their numbers shrank with each passing week. The evidence was too clear. The pattern was too established. The request came unexpectedly. Patricia's lawyer reached out through a mutual contact. He said his client was considering a public statement expressing remorse. In exchange, she hoped Rachel might write a letter to the court supporting early termination of her probation. She wanted to move on. She wanted her life back. She wanted, in essence, to make it all disappear without completing what the court had required. Rachel could have ignored the request entirely. She could have written a letter opposing any modification. Instead, she asked me what I thought. I did not answer immediately. I thought about the Mustang sitting in the garage with its cracked door and scraped paint. I thought about the weeks of isolation, the stares, the whispers, the coworkers who stopped talking to me. Part of me wanted Patricia to feel what we had felt, but another part remembered something Rachel's father used to say. The measure of a person is not what they do when they are winning. It is what they choose not to do. I told Rachel the decision was hers. She thought about it for 2 days. Then she sent her response. The consequences she received were determined by the court based on the evidence. She wrote, "I am not in a position to influence the terms of her probation, nor would it be appropriate for me to do so. If she completes her obligations as ordered, that is between her and the system. I wish her no further harm, but I will not advocate for leniency she has not earned." The lawyer did not respond. Patricia did not get her shortcut, and Rachel made her position clear without overstepping. That night, I asked her if she had any regrets. She was sitting on the porch, looking at the Mustang in the driveway. The restoration was nearly complete. A shop in Phoenix had taken the job. The owner was a veteran who understood what the car meant. He had given us a fair price and done careful work. The door frame was repaired, the paint was restored, the mirror was replaced. From a distance, it looked almost like new, but up close, there were still faint lines where the metal had been bent and straightened. Small scars that would never fully disappear. Rachel ran her hand along the hood. "No regrets," she said. "But I keep thinking about the people who did not fight back, the ones who just left, The ones who paid the fines and stayed quiet because they did not have the resources or the knowledge to push back. She paused. That is why this mattered, not for us, for them. 6 months after the press conference, the Mustang came home, not to the garage, to the driveway, right where it had been the morning everything started. Rachel pulled it in slowly, the engine rumbling the way her father had tuned it decades ago. The restoration shop had done exceptional work. New paint, new chrome, new glass. But when I looked closely, I could still see the faint traces. Hairline scars in the metal where the crowbar that had done its damage. Evidence that would never fully disappear. Rachel said she wanted it that way. A reminder that healing does not mean forgetting. The neighborhood looked different now, not physically. The houses were the same. The lawns were still trimmed to regulation height. The golf carts still hummed down the sidewalks. But something in the air had changed. People waved when we drove past. Not the polite, distant waves of strangers trying to avoid conflict. Real waves. Eye contact. Nods of recognition. Walter Morrison had kept his promise. The new board operated with transparency. Meetings were recorded. Decisions were documented. Complaints required evidence. The rules that had been weapons were now guardrails. It was not perfect. No system ever is. But it was better. The memorial was Rachel's idea. She wanted to do something for her father, something permanent, something that would outlast the legal records and the settlement papers and the fading memories of what had happened. She proposed a bench at the small park near the lake at the edge of the community. The board approved it unanimously. The plaque read, "In memory of Master Sergeant William Torres, service, sacrifice, home." The dedication ceremony was small. A few neighbors, Walter Morrison, a representative from the local VFW chapter, who had heard about the case and wanted to pay respects. Rachel did not give a speech. She just stood beside the bench for a long moment, her hand resting on the brass letters of her father's name. Then she sat down and looked out at the water. I asked her later what she had been thinking. She said she was thinking about the drives they used to take when she was a teenager. Her father is behind the wheel of the Mustang, windows down. The radio is playing something from the 60s. He never talked much during those drives. He did not have to. The car said everything. It said he had survived. It said he had come home. It said that no matter what happened, there was still beauty worth protecting. She wanted other people to feel that when they sat on the bench. Not the story of what Patricia did, the story of what her father built. We took the Mustang out that Sunday, just the two of us. No destination, no agenda, just the road and the engine and the late afternoon sun cutting through the windshield. We drove past the community center where the board meetings had been held, past the spot where the security guards had parked their golf cart, past the houses of neighbors who had believed the worst about us, the neighbors who had stayed silent, and the neighbors who had eventually found the courage to speak. None of them were villains, not really. They were just people who had trusted the wrong voice, people who had learned, too late, that silence has a price. Rachel pulled over near the lake. She cut the engine and sat quietly for a moment. I asked her something I had been wondering for weeks. Do you ever wish you had pushed harder, made Patricia pay more? She did not answer immediately. She looked out at the water, at the bench in the distance, at the reflection of the sky on the surface. Winning is not about how much you take from someone, she said. It is about what you protect, what you build, what you leave behind. She paused. Patricia wanted a war. I gave her consequences. Wars destroy everything. Consequences end. She has to live with what she did. I get to live with how I responded. She turned to me. I like my side better. We sat there until the sun dropped below the trees. Then she started the engine, and we drove home. The Mustang's horn worked again. She honked twice as we passed Walter Morrison watering his lawn. He smiled and waved. The sound echoed down the quiet street. A small thing, but after everything, small things felt like victories. We pulled into the driveway, and Rachel turned off the engine. She rested her hands on the wheel. My father would have liked this ending, she said. I asked her why. She smiled. Because we won without becoming what we fought.